I'm going to go to Waruna next. The fun part about Waruna is not happy with me. He did not like one of my tweets yesterday, in which I said that the 49ers have a strong core group of players and so we should relax. And I'm looking forward to hearing his take on that. And then I think I know the weak part in the argument that I made as well. So let's go ahead and hear you out first, Waruna.
So how are you doing, Jack?
I'm great. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. Actually, I think I made a big mistake because I should not have replied to the tweet. I should have waited until come online. That was
and,
a
and
mistake.
and hit me and not let me prepare, right?
Yes, exactly,
See, you
exactly.
need to. That's all. That's
I made
right.
a
You got
rookie mistake.
to next time. Next time.
Okay. So basically, I mean, I would take the win any day. That's totally fine because
Hmm.
it's a strange season to begin with because Colts are already down like 0-2, Titans are 1-1. Then there are some other teams that we never expected to be. I think Panthers are 2-0. So it's a strange season. But the reason what I'm saying is now, what is our purpose for this season? I think that's where the question comes in. That's why we are questioning this team whether they are on the right track to achieve their goals. For example, yes, we can't be worrying too much about the coming up games weeks ahead, especially the teams on NFC West. But we have to accept the reality that these teams are going to hurt you. At this moment, I don't think 49ers, let's say we might be at the best case scenario, we might be the third best team. If not, we are the fourth team in the NFC West, even with a 2-0 record on the paper. That's so because if we are going to achieve our results in this season, I see there are two things. First things, okay, target for the Super Bowl. If you are playing with Jimmy the entire season, it's okay. Not to start Trey Lance or give him any snaps, it's totally fine. So that we have to have a go at it. Otherwise, let's say we are getting 12. I think this argument was made before as well. Let's say we are going to get 12-5 record with Jimmy and maybe lose in divisional round or whatever it is without going to the Super Bowl. So what's the purpose? Then you could have started Trey Lance and maybe get 10 wins, 9 wins, still develop him, going through his what you call rookie mistakes and everything.
Hmm.
So if we are not going through that path, if we are going with Jimmy, then we should always ask the questions from this team for perfections. Because right now I see. You said yes, we have some very very strong players, core values, but if you take on what do you call average level, some groups are really good, some groups are bad. Because I'm still not sold on our cornerback depth. I believe they are going to lose some games, cost some games for us this season. And quarterback play again, it's average. I mean, I don't think it's still at top 10 quarterback playing in the league. So that's why you see the difference with the Rams. They also have they had very strong core of players, and they replaced the weak link. Now they look like a Super Bowl contender from week one, and they are playing like a Super Bowl contender from week one. So that's where my argument or question comes in, that we need to improve, we need to question this team, basically pressure them to do better than this.
Okay. No, and that's fine. What I would say is that one of the things that I heard throughout Sunday after the 49ers win was how and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the 49ers aren't going to be able to compete in the NFC West with performances like this, right? Or constructed the way that they are. And a lot of that's geared towards Garoppolo and whatever the reason is. And I hear your point on the on the cornerback position, for example, because that is a concern, and that's definitely an area that we need to be worried about to an extent. What I would say is, I went back and looked at this thing during the preseason, before the season even got preseason got started. I went through and I broke down the position groups for all the teams across the league, and what I would say is I think that maybe there might have been a couple of spots that I was off here and there on, but when I was done with ranking them, I had Garoppolo as my fourth quarterback in the league in the West. But when you break up the rest of the roster, the 49ers still came out at 20 at right there with the Rams as the top two, ahead of Arizona and Seattle. I still feel that that's the case. Uh, Garoppolo is who he is, and even with as bad as everybody thought he was in 2019, the team was able to still be really successful, and that's because the way that they play. That the defense has got. You can have the best quarterback in the league, and if your defense isn't good, you're not gonna get to the Super Bowl, or go deep in the playoffs, or maybe even make the playoffs. Right? You need to have all your faces playing together, and that's the thing with the 49ers that I think people get lost in the weeds about with this whole thing, is that yes, Jimmy Garoppolo is probably the. I would argue maybe there might be a chance to say he's a third, but he's definitely at the bottom of the quarterbacks in the NFC West. But the roster itself is extremely good, and the cornerback position, for example, they've did a better job of building that up. They don't have anybody that stands out. Diamond Lenore, I think, has been a revelation in the first 2 weeks, and we're going to find out a lot more about him over these next 3 weeks when he's got to go up against Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson in particular, and see if he's still as good as we think he is. Uh, and if Emmanuel Mosley comes back, I think that helps as well. Josh Norman is a much better veteran presence than what they had last year behind the starters. I would say the same thing with Kirkpatrick as well. I just think the 49ers are a much deeper team to deal with this kind of stuff. And the injuries at the running back position are a concern. But if you're going to lose a position, I think running back is probably the one that you want to lose it at. I think they can fill those spots a little bit easier, and it's going to put a little bit more pressure on Garoppolo. But I think that if the if the offensive line can hold up and give him the time like they gave him in Detroit, they're going to be fine. I think the Philadelphia game was just a little bit different scenario. The home opener for Philadelphia, the place is going crazy. It's a really good defensive front. Garoppolo was not good the first quarter, but the second quarter he started to get himself a little bit under his feet underneath him. The running game started moving the ball a little bit. They were never really consistent with that, and they just found a way to win. And I think that's the deal with Garoppolo leading the 49ers. Is I think people lose track of the fact that he's never had a losing record in a season that he's played in. Even last year, as bad as he was 3-3, and he's better now. And same thing with this. We're off to a 2-0. That they're off to a 2-0 start this year. Um, if you have Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Bosa, D Ford, Jimmy Ward, and Fred Warner, I think that's the core that I'm talking about, right? Is I think that just you build around those guys, and they have a really strong group to work around. So as long as those guys stay healthy, I think this team's going to be really good.
Okay. I think my only question is that yes, for this team to win, the defense has to play week in, week out. At I mean, let's say at their very best. But let's say defense has a off day. Does the offense has the ability, or has the offense shown the ability that they can play catch up football if they are trailing behind by a couple of touchdowns, like how Titans came back against Seahawks? Do they have that ability? That's the other question I have, because I mean, even last year the defense wasn't that bad, even with the injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Any other team would have just been devastated by those kind of injuries, always giving away 30 points for 40 points, but it was not the case. But my question is, when it comes to like, can we, for example, can we be like Baltimore Ravens when they beat Chiefs? They were really down, but still they had whatever the offense to come back from that and beat that team. So are we there yet?
Okay, we don't. It's hard to say, right? Because they haven't. We haven't. They haven't. We haven't seen them get put in that position. What we saw though was we saw them blow out the Lions in the first 3 quarters of the game, right? The fourth quarter, whatever you want to say about the fourth quarter of that game, but they were hardly on the field. The offense was hardly on the field in the fourth quarter of that game, right? They had 2 possessions, and one of them was I think right as they fumbled, on the fumble again and whatnot. So they were hardly on the field in the fourth quarter. The third quarter, they scored 10 points. Uh, the first half of the game last week was rough. What have you? I think you have to. You ask about if they have the weapons. Did what weapons do they not have? Did they have in 2019 that they don't have now? That's my question to you on the
Yes,
offensive
they
side.
have. Yes, they have the weapons. Are they using them properly, or are they showing that they are willing to use them properly? At the moment, it seems like
Well,
offense is a very basic version at the moment. I'm not sure whether that Kyle is doing it intentionally just to make
no,
sure that.
I didn't. I don't think that he held. I don't think that he held them back at all in the first half of the Lions game when they had to get when you're up 31-10 at halftime. You're not going to come out in the second half bombs away, right? You're going to come out and you're going to you're up. They were up 41-17 in that game,
Yes,
and
that's right.
you know I don't. So I don't really know, like in the Lions game, like in that game where people are, because I've heard that game brought up as part of their, as like the fact that they didn't do well in the second half of that game, but they scored 10 points. They were blowing them out. Uh, Last week they just struggled. They were on the road against a team that was playing their home opener, and they struggled for a quarter. They had three bad possessions. They had the three and outs, and some of that was on Garoppolo not making the throws. There was a really
Yes,
bad drop on a screen pass to Debo Samuel. Debo Samuel is one of the best weapons they have, right? They're trying to get him the ball in one of the ways that they usually do, which is on the screen. I know it's a bad. The ball was wobbling like crazy, but it hits him in the hands and he drops it because he turns his head. Um, and then from there, once they started the second quarter, they started moving the ball. The only reason that what cost them that was they had 1st and 10 across midfield for the first time in the game, and they get a crackback block call on Mohamed Sanu. So instead of having
yes.
first and 10 turns to 1st and 25, and then on that 1st and 25, Garoppolo misses the throw
Trent Sherfield.
to Chen Sherfield. Right, bad miss. Can't. There's no.
Yes.
There's no denying that's a bad miss. But the next play, it's not like. Let me take a step and kind of explain part of where all of the different things that are going through my head, because
Yes.
one of the conversations that I see last night is, well, did Shanahan back off and just start throwing all the screens and everything because Garoppolo couldn't hit the throws? Well, if that's the case, when it's 2nd and 25 and he just missed badly, the very next play he throws it 19 yards for a first down or 17 yards for a first down to Debo Samuel. That goes against everything that thought process, right? What And then I didn't like his next play call because now he has 3rd and 8 and he gives a handoff to Debo Samuel. What the heck was that? But I think you've got to look at the way that Shanahan calls the game based off of what's transpiring in front of him. He has a plan, but he changes up his plan based on what's happening, and we saw that in this game. The pass rush was giving him fits, and you can say, like, not you, but people can argue whatever they want about Garoppolo's play, but he's saving that offensive line right now from having more sacks and things like that because of his ability to get the ball out of his hand quick and what have you. And his moving around is so much better. His moving around looks like 2017. So he definitely looks better
I
with that.
agree with that.
You know,
I do
so
agree with that.
I think, like, I understand, like, the hand wringing over this, but I'm telling you, if it's take the game in, go against Green Bay this week. Green Bay's defense isn't Philadelphia's defense as much as whatever, right? The Philadelphia defense that was out there in the first half until Brandon Graham got hurt, that's a different defense than the 49ers even faced after he got hurt. and that's a different defense that teams are going to be facing the rest of the way. So like let's say for example the Rams go up against Philadelphia, let's say they blow them out, and everybody's going to be what right? They're going to lose their mind over it, but they're not playing the same defense that the 49ers played. Just like the 49ers, if you after week one, everybody thought that the 49ers were going to go. It was going to be a cakewalk against Green Bay, right? Green Bay's awful. They could that score 38-3 or whatever their score was to New Orleans. But then look, this yesterday they're right back on the path. And do I think the offense? I think I'm all off track from what you asked me, but yeah, I think they have the ability. They have the playmakers. They do, and Shanahan. The one guy that if you're going to complain about not getting the ball into the hands of somebody, it's maybe to Brandon Ayuk, right? And even with Ayuk, I think there were some. Did you watch the film breakdown? You're probably at work, right?
Yes, I was at work. I couldn't
Yeah.
watch it properly.
Okay.
Yes.
No problem. So there's plays that were called for Ayuk down the field, but for whatever reason they're not able to either Garoppolo chooses to check it down because he's covered, or he's getting pressured, or he's getting pressured because like on the one in route that he threw it over his head. That's
Yes.
a ball that he had to throw early because Mike McGlinchey's getting beat.
Yes.
If he holds that ball and tries to throw it where it's supposed to be thrown, it's a sack. Instead, he tries to make a play and throw it over the top of an underneath linebacker, and that's a tough throw, and it's not a good throw by him either. So it's kind of I think when they play against, if they just play better as offense all around, the questions about Shanahan will go away.
Yes, I think most probably by the week 6, when we have the bye week, we will have most of the answers that we are looking for.
Yeah, I think you're right. By the bye week, you're exactly right. By the time the bye week comes, we're going to know a lot more about where this team. It's a bigger because we're basing all this off of a 2-week sample size, right? So by that point, you're going to have a number of weeks, and they're going to have played some bad teams, and they're going to play some good teams, and then we'll see where it goes from there. I mean, look at the Vikings, right? The Vikings barely beat the Bengals in week 1,
Yes.
or did they beat the Bengals?
No, Vikings are right now
0-2 or 1-1?
0-2.
Okay, so whatever it was, they played a tight game with Cincinnati week 1, right?
Yes.
And nobody thinks that Cincinnati's any good, and then they go in and play at Arizona, and it comes down to a field goal at the end of the game.
Yes.
So I don't think we really know a whole lot about any of these teams at this point. So I'm just basing it off of the personnel of the 49ers and the little bits that we've seen, and there's going to be ups and downs. And when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, this guy's he's a flawed quarterback, but he just wins. That's what's so crazy about watching him play and why it's so frustrating.
I mean, I'm pretty okay with that. Even yesterday, what I mentioned is that even during the first half, people were calling. I think first quarter, people were calling. We should get Trey Lance into the field. I would be like, no. We should not do that. It is Jimmy's team, and if you decided to start with Jimmy, let him play. Whether it's bad or worse, let him build the rhythm. So that's what eventually he did. I mean,
Sure.
290 plus yard touchdowns drive. So I think he deserved it. So if he is the number 1 quarterback, he doesn't have to be look over his shoulder every time whether Lance is going to get my job or not. So
Yeah,
I really respect Kyle for that.
Yep, and I agree. I don't think that the flow of that game really didn't lend to putting in a rookie quarterback. Because the flow of the Detroit game, I think in that whole game you felt better. Even early on, they moved right down the field on them. You felt like they were the better team quick. And I never, and even though I felt like the Niners were a better team than Philadelphia, and that's how it played out, it took them a while to get going, and that's why I wouldn't have felt good about putting. If I put myself in Kyle Shanahan's shoes, I wouldn't have put Trey Lance in the game. Not because I don't think he's, not because I don't want to.
Correct decision.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a correct decision. I mean, I don't think we can blame him for that.
Yeah, why are we arguing about? What are we arguing about? No, I'm just kidding. We're on the same page with a lot of.
Yes, exactly.
But, yeah,
I mean that's my style. Usually, if I see like the argument goes against me, I always try to agree with the other person and just casual conversation.
no, it makes sense. I mean, no, and I think here's the one thing that I will say, and if you go back and you read all of my art, if you read the articles go just skim through the articles that I wrote for Sports Illustrated, during the off season, I questioned the depth of the 49ers, the core, shortly after the season, because their core, there are questions about the core of their team. All the guys that I just talked about as being top level players all have an injury history, and so there are
Yes.
that's where I thought you were going to where you're going to come at me, and that's where I would have come at me if I was you. Was the core of this, the core players that are all their top players all have injury histories, but as long as Garoppolo and Bosa stay healthy, and Jimmy Ward, Debo Samuel, George Kittle, and those guys, if those guys stay healthy, that's a really strong group to kind of weather all the other injuries. Because remember, in 2019, they dealt with a lot of injuries too.
Yes.
They were spread out a little bit more. I mean, they had games without Kittle, and games without Joe Staley, and games without guys in the secondary and stuff, but they were able to weather that, and part of it was because of Jimmy Garoppolo kind of as a steadying influence, I think.
And one final kind of argument I would bring in is that why everyone is trying to criticize a tough win and everything is like thi- this team went to the Super Bowl. It changes everything. Now you look at this team like 2020 is an anomaly, right? 2020 is anomaly, injuries and everything. It's a COVID year, everything. So that's why now we are looking at this team like this is a team that is supposed to be in the playoff each and every year, a team that can win the Super Bowl. So that's why there is always high expectation. I mean, even at I believe at the practices, I mean, training camps, there were more than 20,000 fans were there. Everyone was excited. So I think that's where it all comes in. That's why you see on Twitter, any decision that you make, whether it's right or wrong, I mean, by the coaching staff and whatnot, being questioned due to that fact. Because now it's they believe that 2019 team, they have the core personnel, so they believe that this team also should be held up to that standard. I think uh, that's why you can't blame anyone for questioning this team rather than taking just two victories.
Oh no, sure, I understand. I do understand that. I think the part of it, maybe I look at this differently because I've been around the block a little bit longer than some other folks, and whatever. But you go back and you look at like the 1994 team. That was the last Super Bowl winning team that the 49ers fans have been able to celebrate. That team they had a really big game in week one. They blew the heck out of the Raiders on Monday Night Football, but they weren't very good after that. It took them a little while to kind of get going. They lost the next week to Kansas City in the Joe Steve game. They got blown out by Philadelphia. They had a rough start early on. After that Philadelphia loss, they went to Detroit and they struggled through winning that game. That's and so I think there's a standard, and I think what folks need to realize is it's week to week, and you're not going to win the Super Bowl in September, right? You can lose the Super Bowl in
That's true.
September. You can lose the Super Bowl in September because you can lose games in September that are going to cost you playoff berth. But as long as you win the games, it's about what you do in December and January as far as who's going to be there at the end. Football is crazy because it's only 17 weeks now, 17 games, 16 games compared to like a baseball or basketball season. So we focus on those games so much, but it's a long season, even though there's only a few games. But you've got to win. You've got to win the games when they present themselves to you. We learned that last year, right? The 49ers were, even with all the injuries, were a team that could have made the playoffs, and
Yes.
and they lost games that they should have won. This
Yes.
year they've won two games, both games that they should have won. They've won them, and I think they've won both of those. And I think we need to understand that, and there needs to be a little bit of, like I said in I think the tweet that you responded to me with, right, to debate with me was, hey, the Foreigners are 2-0. You need to enjoy that. You've got a good team. There's going to be ups and downs, but the amount of hand wringing that I see going on after that win, uh, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't, and I think that maybe that's from my background. The way that I look at the game is just different than a fan
Totally
necessarily.
understand. And
So
one thing I want to add is like that's where the difference Jimmy Garoppolo is making for this team from last year to this year. The last year Eagles game, Nick Mullens, he never came back, had misses, interceptions, and everything. Jimmy is not turning over the ball, so I think that's where the credit is due. He
Yeah.
can, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun to watch. This next Monday, Sunday night, I'm looking forward to that one, and I can't wait to get up
yes,
there and cover a regular season game finally from that standpoint. But also, it's going to be a fun game to watch because I just think the 49ers are going to get
yes,
tested defensively like they haven't been yet. And I think the offense is going to play much better. I just have a good feeling about this one. And real quick, last thing, because I didn't get to it, and you had mentioned it. You'd asked. This is the one thing that I'll say. You ask if do they have the firepower to stick with teams, and that's why I asked you. Don't they have all? Tell me who's missing from this team that wasn't on the team in 2019. Because I think that if you asked a 49er fan, they'd all tell you that um, Brandon Ayuk is a better wide receiver than Emmanuel Sanders. I think that's what they would say. Am I right or wrong on that one?
yes, yes, that's true. You are right.
Okay, no, no, and I'm not putting you on the Sanders, but I'm just saying I think
No,
that
no,
he'd
no,
be.
no. I do
Yeah,
really understand the argument. Yes, I
yeah.
know.
So I think
It's a
from a
fact, basically.
yeah, other than Raheem Mostert being injured um, and not being around, I think this team has a ton of all the same weapons. It's the same guys. Debo's still here, George Kittle's still here, and even Raheem Mostert. Nobody knew who Raheem Mostert was until he made some plays for him in the second half of the season, but really, I mean, Raheem Mostert had one game as a 49er that everybody remembers, and that's the NFC Championship game. But before
Yes,
that, he was just kind of a guy on the team. So anyway,
exactly.
I just wanted to make sure I got that out because that was the point I was trying to make earlier, and I just keep talking too much. So I'll be
No,
quiet and let you talk. You
I
take
think
over the show, Aruna.
we had a great conversation.
Yeah, no, it was. I miss these conversations. I don't get to do the roundtables with you guys anymore, so I don't get to bark at you guys. So anyway, anything else you wanted to say?
Mm, no, I want to share a little story I found really interesting. I'll
Yeah,
finish with that.
sure.
After Bill Belichick won his very first Super Bowl, the next day they were supposed to go on a open bus tour through the city. That was the year, I think it was Carolina Panthers. They were going to be the next expansion team. So every team was supposed to name five players who would go on to a kind of a pot that Panthers could pick up. Before getting into the bus, Bill Belichick told one of his players that, hey, before anyone tells you, I named you into that list. This is right after he won the Super Bowl. He was planning ahead.
That's funny. That's funny. That's the way it works, right? It never stops, right?
Yes.
It never stops,
Yes.
especially as a guy like Belichick. He there's a reason why he's been so successful in the NFL as long as he has.
Yes.
So
Yes,
thanks for
exactly.
sharing that. That's a cool story.